Dainua and Telgog. Someone tugged on Dare's pants. Looking down, Dare saw a boy, no older than 6 or 7, surrounded by a gaggle of children.
"Teller of tales, tell us the tale of Dainua and Telgog," the boy squeaked out. "Yes, please," the other children pleaded.
Haven't you gotten tired of this tale yet?"
Dare asked. The children shook their heads back and forth in response.
"I brought a plate,"
one of the older kids chimed in, holding it above her head.
"I have a candle,"
another child yelled, holding it out proudly. Dare removed the blankets from the table and gestured to have the kids gather around. The kids crowded around the table or sat on the dirt floor by Dare. Dare held out a hand to the girl with the plate, took it, and set it down next to his own, which now held just bones, yams, and several empty pea pods. He placed the candle next to the plates. Then, with everything in place, Dare began the tale.
Renahar, the all-knowing, left his daughter Dainua and his son, Telgog, to attend to other matters. As soon as he was gone, Dainua and Telgog got into an argument about who was more powerful. Dainua created around them a perfect blackness and challenged Telgog to create light to penetrate it. A large circle of light appeared, pushing back the darkness. Telgog exclaimed, "I name this."
Here, Dare paused dramatically.
"Farkor," the
children chimed in. Dare took a piece of kindling from next to the fireplace and used the fire to light it. Then, with a flourish, he lit the candle and continued the tale.
"Go on," Dainua chided. "Anyone can do that." "Fine," Telgog spat back. "Give me a challenge." Dainua reached out in the darkness and created a round, flat disc. "I named this
Mayron,"
the children responded. Dare smiled to himself and carried on.
"One side was covered in the light of Farkor, the other in darkness."
Dare picked up the empty plate and handed it to a child across the table from him, who then held it up vertically next to the candle. He continued.
"Light to the other side, brother," Dainua chided. Telgog reached out to the side that was black and with his finger poked a hole in the darkness, leaving a pinpoint of light. He then looked to Dainua and smiled. Turning back, Telgog raced across the darkness, poking at it as he traversed back and forth until the darkness was covered in stars.
Dare stood and fetched the lantern from the mantel above the fireplace. It had a metal plate on one side with holes. He used the candle to light it, then placed it next to the plate in the darkness on the opposite side of the candle. A child reached out and turned the lantern so the side with the metal holes faced the plate.
"Impressive, brother," Dainua exclaimed. "What do you name it?" Telgog replied, "I name it
Lamal,"
the children screamed out.
"And proclaim that I will be the god of all that resides above Mayron, for I am the creator of Farkor as well. Your turn, sister. I leave you this flat, barren disk you named Mayron. Show me wonders that can outshine my creations."
Dare plucked the plate from the child's hands and spun it around, showing its emptiness to all of the children around him before setting it down on the table.
Dainua went down to Mayron, and under the light of Farkor pricked her finger and pressed it into the flat brown dirt. As her blood flowed into Mayron, grasses, trees, and all matter of vegetation arose from the barren land.
Dare grabbed a spoonful of the lumpy yams from his plate and slopped them onto the empty plate, then dipped a finger into his ale and held it over the plate. He mimed pricking it, letting the drop of ale fall onto the yams, then pushed his finger into them. Right on cue, a child grabbed a few pea pods and stuck them in the yams to represent trees. Dare went on.
Telgog looked over the beauty his sister created and wept, not because of its beauty, but because he knew she had beaten him. Telgog's tears dug into Mayron and ran across it.
Dare pushed the plate to children to his left, who drew rivers and lakes in the yams with their fingers. He grabbed his mug of ale and poured it onto the plate until the ale flooded over the small rivers and lakes.
Dainua, not wanting the beauty she created to be washed away, pulled up the land so the tears could not flood it. They flowed down the rivers and around the land.
Dare pushed the plate to the kids to his right. They eagerly grabbed more yams from his plate and slapped them on top, pushing the ale off and around them, shaping the yams into an uneven landscape. Dare poured ale around the yams until the lumps were completely surrounded.
Dainua then created the spine of the world to hold it all together.
Dare grabbed a chicken bone and handed it to the kid who had asked for the tail. The child gingerly placed the bone across the yams.
In order to remind Telgog she was the better of the two, Dainua waved a hand and formed clouds with Telgog's tears. So, every time it rained, it reminded Telgog of his failure.
Then Dare poured more ale onto the plate, but this time directly onto the yams, creating small pools and rivers that flowed into the ale that surrounded the yams.
As the rain fell upon Telgog, he became desperate for Dainua to fail. He looked around and remarked, "This place is beautiful, my dear sister, but it is such a lonely place. Make us playthings that will run across this land, that will bask in the light of Farkor." Dainua sat and mixed the dirt that her blood flowed through with the tears of Telgog. With this mud, she molded all of the animals and all manner of life, from the smallest insects to the birds that dominate the sky that Telgog called his own.
Dare turned and held his hands out over a child at his feet who had heard the tale many times before. He mimed creating something in the air and lifted his hands slowly. The child rose, and as she did, she twisted and turned, as if growing from the floor. The other children laughed, a few imitating her moves.
Looking at the life around him and the birds that now encroached on what was his, Telgog stomped his foot in anger. The force caused Mehron to rotate and the spine to crack.
A small kid elbowed his way past another and grabbed the chicken bone on the yams. As he strained to snap the bone, his face started to turn red and then a deep purple. Just when everyone thought his face would pop, the bone gave a satisfying snap. The kid held the bones aloft as if he had just vanquished some imaginary foe. Then, with a smile of satisfaction, he placed them back down on the yams, leaving a small gap between them. Dare, not wanting to inflate the child's ego anymore, said nothing and continued on.
So, as Mehron rotated, half of the time it dwelt in the light of Farkor and the other half the light of Lamal. Dainua looked up as the light changed from one to the other and proclaimed, "Wonderful! Now Mehron and its many creations can marvel in both of yours." Frustrated and angry, with his head held low, Telgog turned and walked across Mehron, plotting how he could best his sister. Eventually, he came across the most beautiful thing he had ever laid his eyes on. Anger flared in him at the thought of his sister creating something with such exquisite beauty, until he realized he was looking at his own reflection. Suddenly, the answer as to how to beat his sister came to Telgog. Looking around to make sure she was not in sight, he sat and molded from the mud of Mehron a man who was not quite as pretty as himself, because nothing deserved the perfection of a god after all. After creating many men, he set them loose upon Mehron, smirking with glee when he saw that they went about killing and eating the creations of his sister. He was especially delighted when they killed the birds that encroached on his domain.
Dare paused, and as he did, the girls at the table ran about, pretending to be different animals with the boys in pursuit. This went on until a boy tripped and fell against one of the other farmers, causing him to spill his drink. After a stern scolding for running and a disapproving look towards Dare, the children returned to hear the rest of the tale.
One day, while walking in one of the many forests she created, Dainua found a doe of exquisite beauty had been killed and butchered for its parts. Horrified, she searched for what could have caused such destruction. Dainua followed the trail of blood and ruin to find the men Telgog created, gleefully devouring the doe. Trying to temper man's lust for killing and butchering, Dainua molded many likenesses of herself, and unlike her brother, she made the women more alluring and beautiful than she. Once man had found woman, his desire and lust turned to them, craving them above all other things. The women, smarter than the men, used their beguiling ways to temper man's desire and help show him how to cultivate the land and admire Mehron for its beauty, not just what it could give. The men and women then started to pair off and make pacts that they would desire none other but the one they were with. Dainua, enthralled by these creations, hid her beauty and radiance so she could walk among them. One day, coming upon a farmer who was harvesting his fields, she stopped to remark on his hard work and asked for the first fruits of his labor. The man spat at her, telling her that a stranger didn't deserve any of his crops, let alone the first of them. Dainua turned and left after telling the farmer that the only fields he would be able to sow were that of the ground and that no fruit would ever come from his loins. Later, in one village that Dainua came across, she found a man who stood out from the others. He was kind, helped injured animals, and always gave more than he took from Mehron.
"Stay away!"
a few kids yelled. Dare gave them a disapproving glance and continued the tale.
Though she knew it was wrong, she gave her heart to the man and, under a willow tree, devoted her life to walking by his side, remaining companions until he died, and she would be forced to live with just the memory of him. Dainua soon became pregnant and had twins, a boy and a girl. As her husband looked down upon them and started to smile, his face rippled. Suddenly, her brother stood before her. "Oh, sister," Telgog sneered deviously, "you may have bested me at everything else, but to these children I give a curse, that one will walk in the light and the other in darkness. The one who walks in the light will live by feasting upon the souls of all that you have created. The other will be cursed to live in the deep, dark places, feasting upon the flesh of these humans you have grown to love so much. This leaves you with a choice. Do you kill these children, or watch them grow and become a blight upon all that you have created and cherished?" In her anger at Telgog for defiling the two things that were, in her eyes, the greatest creations she had ever made, Dainua grabbed her brother and dragged him to the heavens, trapping him there to spend eternity looking down at the beauty she created. Watching her children from the heavens, Dainua cried, and as her tears fell, they froze and covered the once green and beautiful Mehron in a thick blanket of white snow. Seeing the snow, Dainua created winter as a remembrance of her pain and anguish. Then she turned to the heavens and rearranged the stars in a likeness of herself, weeping. Dainua created the rest of the seasons to commemorate the love she has for us. Spring, to remind us of her gift of creation. Summer, for the peaceful times she walked amongst us. And fall, for the lost love she had. Dainua separated her children. The one cursed to live in light she left upon the doorstep of the farmer who had spat upon her, to bless his wife with the child he could never give. They raised Dainua's daughter as their own, giving her all the love for which Dainua had hoped. The one who was cursed to live in darkness was left with a pack of wolves to be raised so that he could learn to hunt and kill animals and not humans. She gave his offspring, those he sired with wolves, the other side of Mehron to dwell in, though it was barren and desolate. So, children, every spring Telgog rises in the east to see new life emerge from the cold grips of winter. We use his coming to know when to plant our crops. He sets in the fall before winter comes. That is when the crying mother emerges from the west to tell us it is time to reap what we have sown and prepare for the long winter months ahead.
Once the tale was done, the children got back to the games they were playing. The boy who asked for the tale stayed behind, looking at Dare.
"What happened to Dainua?"
the boy implored. Looking down at the boy, Dare replied,
"No one knows. Some say her father came back and banished her for eternity for trapping her brother. Others say she walks Mehron, looking after us."
"What about her baby she left with the farmer?"
"That child and all of its lineage became crop burners, cursed to kill the land they touched."
Dare's mind wandered to the past, until a tugging at his pants brought him out of his reverie.
You get one more question and then run along,
Dare directed.
What happened to the other baby?
It's said that a few of them burrowed down and out into our world. They are the Deamhons that roam our woods. However, that is a tale for another time.